It's our last edition of the program from Frontier Opening Bell. I'm Temple Ashaju. Thank you for joining us on the show. We've got Ali Kansacho joining us from Nairobi this Friday, and Bosun Omofaye, Frontier Africa Reports. Thank you, gentlemen, for your presence on the program this morning. We look at the markets indices. Nigeria was up yesterday, 0.54%. Ivory Coast, the BRVM Stock Exchange in that location, was also positive by 28 basis points. The Egyptian Stock Exchange went lower by 1.35%, while Nairobi Stock Exchange jumped by 1.28%. And of course, Johannesburg Stock Exchange managed to get some 0.16% positive on Thursday. Let's look at the East African headlines now, where the future of Tanzania is at stake. We're saying that we now know that President Magufuli has now passed on, and of course, we are hoping that the Vice President, Ms. Hassan, will become the president. She'll be sworn in. It is expected to be done in the next 24 hours. Kenya, we've got Geothermal Development Corporation securing $5 billion grant from African Union. KCB's got net profit of 22% decline on loan loss provision and, of course, slowing economic growth. Coke Bank posts 24.4% in PAT. Of course, then we've also got our Shemu PLC pumping some 1.6 billion per in edible oil unit. Nairobi Stock Exchange's regional capital market REITs stand here now for real estate investment trusts. Webinar holds today. And let's begin with Ali, who's going to be giving us some rich analysis on all of these headlines.
Thank you, Temple. Let me first start with the news from Tanzania, where we had the swearing in of, as you know, the first female president in the East African community. We're following on the heels of Ellen Sirleaf Johnson. And I think, you know, that of itself is a significant development. This was the vice president under President Magufuli, and under the Constitution, she will serve out the rest of his term. President Magufuli was an interesting and complex individual. I mean, you can see that from the media analysis. What caught everybody's attention was his approach to COVID. He said it did not exist in Tanzania. He said the power of prayer would get rid of it. He was pretty much anti-vaccines, and this, of course, caught everybody's attention. It looks as if he caught COVID himself. He had an existing comorbidity. And I think that speaks to the first challenge for the incoming president, which will be how she chooses to deal with the COVID situation, because if you just take evidence, it is raging as we speak in Tanzania, particularly among the upper echelons of the party, many of whom, of course, didn't wear masks and didn't take precautions. So I think that will signal her approach. Her name in Swahili translates into reconciliation. So, you know, I think there's an opportunity for her to be the great reconciler. President Magufuli was quite abrasive and adversarial at home, did not brook any opposition, took quite a firm approach to dissenting voices, as you probably know, but was actually well respected with respect to the economy. He spoke to quite an aggressive approach. You will remember he turned down financing from China for the Bulawayo port, and he said you had to be insane to sign the terms and conditions that came with that loan. He was very aggressive with the mining companies. Barrick Gold essentially settled for a lower equity share and a higher revenue share for the Tanzanian government. And I think, therefore, when you look at his legacy, it's going to be a mixed bag. And I think, unfortunately, the whole COVID approach, like it was for Thabo Mbeki and HIV/AIDS, it becomes front and center and dilutes the rest of the story. Tanzania remains a very strong economy, although it's agriculturally based, cashew nuts and a lot else, but it has a tremendous amount of potential, which he was trying to unlock. And I think with the less abrasive atmosphere, the incoming president has an opportunity to dash for growth in Tanzania. Big infrastructure project outstanding is the pipeline from the Albertine Basin in Uganda to the Tanga port. The railway, which he wanted to build to challenge Kenya's railway, which was also going to connect to other East African community countries and as far as DR Congo, which is currently trying to accede to the EAC. So it's a very interesting scenario. Folks see him in black or in white, but I think this is a positive development because there was a lot of uncertainty about how this transition would play out because of the Tanzanian government's reluctance to give us news on the president's health. Jumping to your other headlines, Kenya Geothermal Development Corp gets 5 million from the EU. Kenya ranks 6th worldwide in terms of geothermal resources. It's a huge potential for powering the industrial revolution in Kenya. KenGen has played a very big role and is currently also advising regional countries like Djibouti and Ethiopia about unlocking the geothermal resource. We are now into the results season at the Nairobi Securities Exchange, full year results for 2020. The big boys have released results. KCB, the biggest bank here in Kenya and in East Africa, profits down 22%, spoke of a slowing economy, have had to deal with a huge amount of non-performing loans. But 22% down, not too bad, frankly, in the circumstances, I think, of the pandemic. And also the CEO has been striking a more bullish tone about about this year, and talking it up and talking the bank's prospects up. They are in all the East African community countries, and profits from the regional subsidiaries are about 15% of the total profits. And I think there's a big opportunity to leverage that footprint further and improve the overall performance. Co-op Bank, very interesting, tier 1 bank as well, like KCB, but operating in a very interesting niche, which is the cooperative society niche, which is a very big thing here in Kenya. And what I found interesting, okay, they had to put up the credit provisioning by 400% expected, but they maintained their dividend at £1 a share, something KCB cut back on the dividend payout dramatically. So if you look at the share price, that's a very attractive dividend, will underpin the bank, because like you guys in West Africa, investors like dividend cash flow under all circumstances, and I think that will support the price going forward. And just finally touch on your NSE story about REITs. One of the REITs reported this morning quite good results, actually, notwithstanding some credit losses at their flagship shopping mall. But the perception is that there is a large opportunity to bring real estate companies via the REIT vehicle to the Nairobi Stock Exchange. We haven't seen much since we saw that first listing, which was subsequently bought out. But there is room here to do much more.
Thank you very much, Ali, for all of these excellent analysis. Bosin, I'm sure you have one or two things to say by way of addition, especially around Tanzania. We've got Ms. Hassan coming in. How much of expectation can we have around how she will manage the COVID-19 effects?
Well, I think I'll defer everything to what Ali has said. On the business side, there was an analyst note which was released late yesterday by Standard Bank of South Africa talking about business confidence in Tanzania based on what is expected as a political transition. Based on the swearing in this morning of Mrs. Samia Suluhu, I think they've crossed that bridge. How she will perform in the office as a president remains to be seen. Investors will be a little bit cautious to see if she will hold as much presidential power in the inner political circle, wranglings or whatever, or jostling will allow her to effectively function. That remains to be seen. So it's in the best interest of Tanzania and everyone within the country to connect and continue on the trajectory of the late President John Magufuli's economic drive. I think that is very important. Tanzania, we wish them all the best.
Thanks a great deal, Bosun, for that. Omotayo Idowu, thank you for joining us from Greenwich Merchant Bank. Appreciate your presence on the show, and hopefully you'll be able to give us some analysis before we run before the end of the show. We'll move on now to the Western African headlines, where the Rise Fund invests $200 million in Airtel subsidiaries. GT Bank, that's Guaranty Trust Bank, one of the tier 1 banks in Nigeria, has got profit after tax rising by 2.3% to over 201 billion naira. North-South Power also signs 25-year concession of hydropower plants, while Seplat subsidiary West Coast Oil is also getting the November 2023 facility with new lending for March 2026. That's sometime next week. Apple Group Invest Africa Limited partner to promote trade in Africa, and Senegal's inflation is at 1.7% year on year, as at February, compared to 0.9% that was recorded in January. Finally, for this trade here, we've got Ghana looking maybe struggling to float the $5 billion that it is looking to raise in the Eurobond space, says analysts. Let me come to you quickly with the GT Bank story, and perhaps any other headline you quickly want to pick on Motayo.
Thank you very much, Tempo. So with respect to GT, they released their financials yesterday, and we even saw that the market closed in green as a result as well. We see the gross earning. There was about 5% increase in its top line gross earning. And then we also saw a ticker up when it comes to its non-interest interest income of about 9.6%. And also with respect to its profit after tax, I mean, that was a good one as well, with a 2.3%. And then he declared a final dividend of 2.7, bringing the total dividend for the entire year to 3 naira, which was, when compared to what was declared in 2019, was about 2 naira 80 kobo. So basically, I mean, it's obvious that the whole pandemic and COVID-19, more like COVID-19 incidents impacted financial institutions, I mean, positively, even when you compare their results as well to that of other peers, you know, Zenith as well. We saw that, I mean, they did pretty well. And so this is quite, it was as expected, basically. Yes, it was as expected. Then going on to the other headlines, with respect to Rise Fund investment, about $200 million in Airtel mobile money business. You know, lately we have been seeing a lot of traction when it comes to fintech and you know, the whole fintech space. Last week or 2 weeks ago, we saw that Flutterwave raised about 117 million. And prior to that as well, we also saw in Egypt, there was this Dara as well. They got some funding. Basically, this is just that it speaks to the fact that tech is king. I mean, tech is king. The way in which even the whole pandemic, the way it has impacted the whole world, it's obvious that we can't do away with technology. And so it's important that businesses start to pay keen attention when it comes to technology, how to upscale their business. And we expect to even see more of this kind of investment, you know, going forward in the year. Then with respect to North-South Power concession, I mean, it's good that we are seeing a lot of alternative, you know, energy solutions, renewable energy solutions. Last week or 2 weeks ago as well, we saw that there was this Morocco deal with Nigeria on maximizing our gas. So this as well, we are hoping that it would yield, you know, positively when it comes to power generation. Also with Seplat refinancing their facility. It's as expected. It was declared in the company's financials released earlier in the month that they were going to engage in a lot of refinancing acts, and so this is one of it. And then with the APO group investment or partnership rather with Invest Africa, sorry, excuse me, with Invest Africa, it's a good synergy. You know, these are the kind of synergy that we need to see to create traction in Africa, you know, whereby businesses are engaging in symbiotic relationship that propels the growth of the African continent. Thank you.
Thank you very much for helping us to understand all of these West African headlines. Motayo. We'll move on now to the Southern African headlines, where South Africa's wholesale trade dips by some 7.1% year on year in January 2021. Nobansa Sengwa to become Exaro's first female CEO in 2023. Rockwell Diamonds Incorporated completes the mergers and acquisition with Briscoe, and Sasfin Bank to fund proposed share buyback with 127.6 million rand. And of course, the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange there is carrying out a survey on the possible listing of one of its Zimbabwean dollar bonds. Let me come back to you now, Ali, for these headlines in Southern African markets before we finish off with the Northern African headlines.
Yes, thank you. So, you know, South Africa wholesale trade dipping 7.1% year on year in January 2021. So that's capturing, you know, the pandemic, the lockdown. We should see a recovery. 0.6% month on month speaks to that incipient recovery that we should see gain momentum this year. So I think, you know, that data point is backward looking. We know what we've experienced down there. Interesting for me is the recovery in the currency. This morning, I think the rand was around 14.70, and it's been relatively untroubled by the volatility we've seen in the US bond market, which has put pressure on some emerging market currencies. We saw this sharp rate hike in Turkey, 200 basis points, more than expected. Brazil, 75 basis points, and advising us that you know, we should expect another one at the follow-on meeting. So for now, I think, you know, if I look at emerging markets, I look at South Africa. I think South Africa will be very keen to maintain interest rates where they are. And it will be interesting to see how the macro indicators, including the currency, perform, given the volatility we're seeing emanate out of the US bond market specifically. Then just to touch on the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange doing a survey and a possible listing of a bond. Look, you know, Zimbabwe has been trying to normalize the financial situation there. Of course, we've still got runaway inflation, though it's trending lower. And the question is, you know, is there going to be international appetite to get involved? Will these Zimbabwean authorities be able to price this bond effectively in order to attract international interest? For me, that will be the main test. You know, domestic institutions in many cases are forced to buy because of the nature of the balance sheet and the nature of the regulatory environment. But really, I think the test is what are the internationals going to do? And if I was sitting in Harare, I'd send them over to Cairo and say, go and have a chat with those boys and see how they did it.
Thank you so much for all that, Ali. Let's finalize now with the Northern African headlines, where Fitch Ratings has now said that the emerging markets, Europe and Middle East African region will see higher reported non-performing loans in 2021. The Banque of Cairo also gets EBRD's 1.57 billion Egyptian pounds for SME lending. Restart Bank says no plans to merge with MISA or to merge MISA Capital and CI Capital. Also, let me start with you on these headlines in the Northern African space.
Thank you, Tempo. I think I will speak with a story about Nigeria and Southern Africa. Maybe Ali will touch on more of the North Africa. I think the story about Ghana's 5-year bond. You can hear me?
Yes, we can. Just go on. Go on.
Yeah, the Ivorians were, I think they were a bit smarter. They did their Eurobond and all that late last year, and they quickly took it out of the way. I think a few other countries within the Frontier Africa also did very quickly. Because again, now that the US Treasury is up and all of that, it's going to be a little bit difficult for everyone now, anybody now to go to the market. And $5 billion for Ghana is very, very hefty. If you ask me right now, and what rate would they be issuing it with the US bond yields across the developed markets heading seriously up, including emerging markets, by the way. So that also holds the same situation for a few others who may also have some intention to do that. So it's not going to be very easy, by the way. What the Zimbabweans are trying to do is to try their currency, which is the Zimbabwean dollar, against the US dollar. The authorities there, the finance minister, they actually want to de-link finally the US dollar from their own domestic dollar and see how they can raise local bonds on their own in local dollar, and see how that will interest both local and foreign investors. So the jury is out. The Zimbabwe Stock Exchange is trying to conduct a survey and see how that will eventually come through, if that will be possible.
All right, then. Thank you, Bosun, for these analyses. Sorry, I should have actually come to you, but I was just being mindful of the time. That's also why I skipped that earlier. Thank you for those analyses. So let's get Ali to help us finish up, and we hear a bit of forward guidance from Omotayo regarding the Nigerian markets.
So just quickly to add to what Bosun was saying, you mentioned Ghana's very big call for $5 billion. And I think a lot of African countries, if they are keen on going back to the Eurobond market, are going to need some kind of external affirmation from the likes of the IMF. So someone like Kenya, late last night it was announced the IMF had put together a 3-year program in excess of $2 billion. Interestingly, one of the details in that announcement was that Kenya was at high risk of debt distress, and that was a quote unquote from that particular release. But what it does is give Kenya cover to issue into the Eurobond market. So I think, African countries, we know that its balance sheets have deteriorated during the pandemic. Will need the support from these external multilateral agencies. And I think, just to go back to the Ivory Coast comment that Bosun made, Ivory Coast were very clever because they didn't come out with 5 billion. They came out with less than $1 billion call. So what they kept investors hungry for more. And that for me was a very clever way of going about things. And, I think comments out of Ghana are just going to scare people. Investors will demand a bigger premium. You've got to be smart, you've got to be market savvy, and you've got to message the market appropriately. And I think that Ghana messaging was very garbled.
Okay, so you've got 1 or 2 headlines to pick from the North African markets. We're running out of time, but if you could just speak to them.
Just quickly on the Fitch, EMEA region should see higher reported NPLs in 2021. Yeah. I think pretty much that story is going to continue to play out across the continent, although it will depend on how aggressive banks were in terms of taking those hits last year. But essentially, I think, the northern part of Africa is a mixed bag. You had Egypt growing at above 3%, so you've got a much better story, less of an NPL ratio situation developing out of there. Then you've got someone like Tunisia, heavily dependent on tourism and still plenty of uncertainty on the streets. Then you've got someone like Algeria running down the FX reserves, running out of FX now, and also significant problems in terms of how they're dealing with the streets. And you've got Morocco, which is more bullish. So, it's easy to paint a broad picture, but really there is nuance in the granularity of some of these areas.
I appreciate that, Ali. Thanks a great deal. Omotayo, any additions in 1 minute or thereabouts before we go?
Okay, so my addition really is to the Southern African news on Nubansa Senegal becoming the first female CEO. I see this as an interesting news because lately we've seen a lot of women, coming up to positions of authority, and I expect that this should continue. I mean, women representation should increase when it comes to engagement in management levels, executive levels, and the rest of it. Thank you.
And you're going to be having a female president in Tanzania, actually.
Exactly.
So it's a win-win for you at this point. Thank you so much, Omotayo Edu, analyst from Greenwich Merchant Bank. Appreciate your thoughts on the show. Bosunamo Fire Executive Editor here at Frontier Africa Reports. Thanks a great deal. Ali Kansaku, always appreciative of your rich analysis. Thanks a great deal. Have yourself a wonderful weekend, lady and gentlemen. I'm Temple Ashaj, and this has been Frontier Opening Bell for this week, the last edition of it. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.